Thank you to Ubisoft for giving us an early access review code for Mirage. This is my first ever review code, and I believe it's because they noticed that I was doing 15 years in 15 weeks, and that I have played all of the major games in the series in the last 15 weeks. So I want to provide that perspective for you guys. This is not my normal setup, by the way. I'm at something called Vid Summit where I'm learning about YouTube, and two of the things I've learned is put out the videos, get your practice, and also try to create value for people. So we're doing that even from a hotel room, and I am so excited to share this game with you and a few thoughts that I think will hit for anyone who loves this series. There will be spoilers, so just be aware of the first 2 to 3 hours of the game, but if you're trying to decide if this is the game for you, or you just want to dig in deep with someone who also loves this series, let's talk about it. So I wanted to pop through this, but I tried a first take of it, and I just want to maybe like not even play any of it for you. I just kind of literally want to pop through and show you a couple things on the screen. But I want to go through a couple points about the things that I predicted and the things that they did phenomenally well, and just one thing at the end that is the only thing that makes it imperfect to me, but that was expected, to be honest. They set expectations perfectly. This is one of the only games in recent times that I can think of that actually set expectations properly and released without bugs, at least in the first 2 to 3 hours of the game. I am like truly blown away by this. I was hoping for this, and I didn't want to get my hopes up too high, but I really did put a lot of hope in this game. And I know a lot of people, a lot of the big YouTubers will say, like, be careful with your expectations in games, and they're very right. I was let down by Cyberpunk, and I never, ever want that to happen again in a game. So I generally curb my expectations a little bit, but this one has blown me away, and I'm so happy it has, because I adore this series. I'm someone who likes both the old and the new. To get into it real quick in terms of where this might sit for you as an Assassin's Creed player, this is much more like the old style. I would say it's closest to 1 and 4 in my mind, and those are my two favorites. My favorite is 4, that's the one I started with. 1 is my second favorite, and then Odyssey is actually my third favorite. And I'll tell you at the end where I think this is going to line up for me in the lineup. I predicted it would be in the top 5. I predicted a lot of things that are like dead on. The only thing so far that I'm not sure about is a plot point later in the game. I hope that the Baghdad battery comes up. I don't know if it will, but that's just like a little aside that I added into my predictions because I found it in AC4, and I was like, that would be cool to include since we're literally in Baghdad at some point in the game. So, at the very beginning, we are William Miles. I knew that was going to be the case, but anybody who didn't play the DLC might not know that. Because you might think you were going to be Basim instead. And I'm trying to say Basim instead of Basim. I keep saying Basim, so if you hear that, William's apparently the only one that agrees with me on that pronunciation, so we're going to try to say it the right way. But he's the one who is narrating the very beginning of the game here, and it makes sense because he's looking for something in his memories. He thinks that the Assassin's Creed is like starting to shift into a time when there needs to be nuance. I don't know what he knows, and it's interesting. I wish we could dig into more of that. I hope that there's going to be some stuff in maybe the database to show it. Since we have Sean right now, maybe there will be some context clues there. He basically said he lied to someone about this memory not existing, so I don't know if that means he knew Basim existed. It'll be interesting to see how much information he had at some point. See, I fear that time is coming soon. That's exactly what he was talking about. He also says something really cool about those who live in the shadows could give in to the shadows easily instead of the light. I think that's a perfect way of clarifying like where they're at in the Creed and this point in time. So I think we have a really good starting point. They hit the story beats perfectly. If you've never played an Assassin's Creed, I think this could be a really good starting game for you. My only reason I wouldn't recommend this to someone is someone who's not a gamer. I think that this is a game for gamers. And I think that we need more games for gamers where everything isn't perfectly obvious all the time. So I do think that somebody who's like never played a game before would struggle with this, or somebody who just needs like all of the context clues. But you could probably put it on easy and be fine, and put on all of the accessibility options and be fine. So just know that this is paced perfectly for someone who has played a game before. Which, to be honest, a lot of games are like, oh, we've got to give them everything on a silver platter, or the lowest or like the most common denominator isn't going to be able to play. So I appreciate that a game isn't holding our hand the entire time, and it gives us a bit of ability to explore it and learn it for ourselves, especially those who have played the series before. So I think they balance really well the new and the old players. I think the tutorials are short and sweet. I think they come at the perfect time. I think they summarize them well. At some point later when he's at the assassin camp, they summarize the combat, and I think that was a perfect time to do it. It just pops up on the screen briefly. You can get rid of it, and it's done. And so it does like a little reminder that way, rather than doing like a million pop-ups as we've seen in some previous games and in other games generally these days. So I think they had a perfect blend there. The story starts off super strong. The writing is the best that I have seen in a game since Last of Us 2. Period. End of story. I know there's people who think whatever about Last of Us 2. The story is phenomenally written there, and the story is phenomenally written here. They hit all the perfect beats at the right time. There's a catalyst, there's a turning point, there's foreshadowing. There was a piece of foreshadowing they put at the beginning, immediately paid it off, and a piece of foreshadowing that they won't pay off until much later in the game. And I bet there's a few I didn't catch. The one that they set us up with is where he says a little like something that nobody would really notice necessarily unless they're paying very close attention to the dialogue, but it's him and his friend talking about the guy who normally gives them contracts. And he says he is just a messenger. So he wants to get to the people in power and talk to them and make a name for himself. And he says this one-off line about he's just a messenger. But then when we're at the camp later, you hear someone say, we are just messengers. And that makes me think that that's going to come into play, and Basim's going to have conflict with them and say, oh no, I want to be a decision maker. So I think that's foreshadowing for his journey. The shorter foreshadowing that they paid off immediately was that he knows the children in the area. Here's the guy they take the jobs from. The children in the area, and one of them has this little slingshot, and I was like, oh, maybe he's going to get that slingshot as a tool. I should have known better. I've seen the skill wheel, or the tool wheel, and I laugh because I don't want to cry. It was not foreshadowing for him getting that tool. It was foreshadowing for them to then show that slingshot in a very emotional moment a little bit later, where it had an impact of, oh, they just died for what we just did. And it just pans up to that slingshot, and it just breaks your heart. So they set that Chekhov's gun at the very beginning, paid it off immediately, set up some others that won't pay off until the end. The storytelling is I cannot give enough credit to the writers of this game. Phenomenally done. Let's see what else. Oh, throughout this 2 to 3 hours that I played, I think I heard Ezio's Family 3 times, their version of it for Mirage. They do a version for every game. And the soundtrack itself, really, really good. Again, I kind of want to compare it to Last of Us 2. It just hits really well. The only game I can think of that was this cinematic was that. And in recent times. And with this current, like, technological ability, right? Technological capabilities. So I don't know if there's a good scene for me to show you, but the cinematics are perfect. Here's like where you can kind of see they even are framing it in a very like film cinematography way. And they can do that now because they don't have the dialogue choices of the last 2 games. So the last time we had some cinematography was Origins, but they've really upgraded from there in this, in my opinion. They also have great limiters on the seamless powers. So, the great limiters on seamless powers. So, the Eagle Vision is a really good example of that. I also think they've done perfect button layout. They really thought it out. Some of the games didn't feel like they were thought out as well. You can make it work, and it worked, and it worked well, and it was fun, and once you got used to it, it was fine, right? But this one, you can tell they really thought out about, like, the button placement, and I think having R1 do both the light and the heavy is a really interesting way to do it, along with having the wheel on R2. It just makes it quick. It's great. And then talking about, like, the seamless limiters, the stamina isn't as used in this game because you won't be probably getting into combat as much if you do the game the way it was kind of intended. You can choose between the two, but as with the others, you're going to want to do stealth before combat, right? They're gonna make that more rewarding. The combat is there if you want it, and it's a last resort type of thing if you make a mistake, right? So I think that's perfect. And it looks like they'll still have, like, possibly some boss battles in it. We did a little bit of boss battle training, so I think it's going to be a really good blend of both. Every game, even since 1, has had combat, so I think that it's going to be the right approach. But with the seamless, I was thinking of the Eagle Vision because they have where you can press it and it holds now unless you start to run. So as long as you're stealthing, you still get to continue having the Eagle Vision. And how they limit that is that they kind of blur the edges so you have, like, a tunnel vision with it. So it's not something that you would necessarily want to use all the time. So you can't just overuse it because it doesn't feel very comfortable, even though it's very useful. So I think they did a really good job of limiting that. I feel like they're probably going to do a good job of limiting anything Isu related. So I know people were nervous about that, and they were like, oh, the power where he can, like, jump, you know, and he's, like, skipping in time or, like, space, you know. And I don't think it's going to be a big deal. I think they're going to limit it perfectly based on seeing this. I thought they were already, because they usually write in really good ways of handling this. I don't really understand a lot of people's complaints with some of the stuff like that, so I think it's perfect. The mission structure is perfect. It feels a lot like 4. The structure of the game feels a lot like 1. The story, again, has perfect catalyst, turning points, pacing. I feel drawn in. I have the agency, but it's not too much agency for me not to want to, like, run around. They even build running around into the story, doing the parkour. I had so much fun with parkour. I really want to touch on parkour in that it is quite possibly my favorite parkour that has happened in the series. I know that that is probably something that a lot of people aren't going to agree with, because they're like, well, what about Unity? And I get it. Unity technically had the best parkour system, right? The most freeing system, the most flowy, fun, just system, right? But the mapping to me matters. And 1 and 4 had the tightest mapping with the most up and down, like, vertical and horizontal options, where you were just in, like, all of the little pieces in between that connect and go around the buildings and connect to the buildings. So without you having to touch the ground. Whereas Unity, you were running across long rooftops and you had really wide gaps that you couldn't cross. So for me, the tighter mapping makes the parkour, like, just more fun. And so this is quite possibly the perfect parkour system for me. If they took Unity's parkour and put it in something like this, yes, maybe it could be improved. But right now, this is quite possibly going to be my favorite parkour system. I said it would be one of my top. I didn't want to get my hopes up too high, but I think this is going to be my favorite. I had so much fun just bopping around. I even said it in my first recording of this. I pressed play and I just was going on about, like, how I don't even need a game. I could just parkour the whole time. Beautifully done. This is also the first assassin journey that we get from, like, the very beginning of their journey. I thought that was really neat. I don't know how we haven't had that in 15 years. I don't know if we've had it in a side one, but from the main games, we haven't had that. So I thought that was it's a really good time to have that. I think it's perfect. Okay, so there was a really important piece, the feather note that we get when they're at camp. It's meta. It's huge. I'm probably going to talk about it more in a video essay later on, but I want to touch on that. I think they are speaking to the player in the homages that they do to the old games, and just all of the games, really. They have a lot of similarities, again, to 4 and 1, but they have pieces from a lot of other stuff. Obviously, it's built on the Valhalla, like, code, so there's a lot of similarities there. But they took these pieces and they really remade it into a game that I think is super cohesive and has the right like synergies between story and gameplay and everything that they're trying to do in the game. And they spoke directly to the player. I could be reading this too much or reading into this too much, but it feels like they spoke to the player directly in this note about the history of the feathers and how they're used, which was only used in 1 and then sort of in Syndicate with the handkerchiefs. They said something about how we can't get away from the past. It's important for the future and in relation to the feathers, but I think they were also saying that to the player, right? And again, I could be reading into that because I think it also is trying to show that the 2 leaders of the area have a slightly different mindset, because just before that, Roshan had said something about how forget the past, like focus on the future. So they might have different mindsets because that was the other leader writing that note. So it could have 2 reasons there, right? A reason within the story and a reason to say that to the player, and I thought that was neat. I think the minimalistic HUD works better here than in Valhalla because the game is simpler, and so we don't have a ton of skill tree stuff. We don't have a bunch of stuff to worry about. We don't need to memorize all these systems that we're changing all the time in terms of like putting different abilities in place. So I think that the minimalistic HUD, and it's like such a smaller map with smaller things that you're worried about at one time. You don't have a million different missions you're thinking about all at once, or objectives you're thinking about. So for me, I think the minimalistic HUD really fits this game. I was kind of complaining about it a little bit in Valhalla at the beginning, only because it just felt like we needed more for what we were trying to do. So this fits well. We have black box again, like Unity and Syndicate, and I think it's done really, really well for this, once again, because of the size and scope of the game. They have the element tie back to Masaev, which apparently it's the parent of Masaev. Basically, they built these all kind of around the same time and in the same way. This is where they do that. They were talking about being messengers at this point in the game. They do a really good job of connecting details from old games. So some of the games, it feels like they sort of not forget the roots, but just try to do something different and unique, and then don't really mention the roots. And this one takes care to mention all of the details from other games that connect, and I think that's really neat. Even down to small details like the AI with the eagle vision. When you're seeing the AI, you can also see the directions. It's very faded, muted, and hard to see. So it's just enough. It's not like giving it to you too loudly. It's like this minimalistic, hey, if you're really looking for it, you can see the direction that they're going. I think that just the attention to detail is killer for me. One odd thing to me was the leap of faith. I think they did a really good job of not having the real leap of faith until he gets his initiation. It doesn't, like, Ezio already had it before his initiation, so that doesn't quite like equate, but that could be more of a mistake on the Ezio end than here if you were to assign either of them as a mistake. But it is a difference, and I think that this one works a little bit better in that way. Though he didn't get initiated until he'd been an assassin forever, so that part of the Ezio trilogy is kind of funny to me. But I'd say this is easily the best start to an AC game ever, and it like, possibly. It depends on what you're into, but I think that just the way that they bring you into the story is good. It's definitely one of the best starts to a game in recent years. We get a montage, which I think is fun. I thought it fit really well with the way that they're telling the story, though I will say I don't know how well it fits into the Animus. I'll have to think about that one a little bit more, but I think it fits really well with the story, and it brought me a lot of joy. I thoroughly enjoyed the montage. Good stuff. We even get to see him training with the eagle and it not being necessarily like super easy for him at first, which I thought was neat. The only like kind of even slight complaints I have, and they're just truly nitpicky because this game is chef's kiss. Sometimes the dialogue was longer than it took me to get to a certain point, but I am really fast after 15 weeks. Even while I'm streaming and talking to chat, I'm probably faster than average. So hopefully people do get those dialogue options, but there were a couple times that I didn't get to finish the dialogue before I got somewhere, and then it like went to the next cutscene and I missed the dialogue, which I was sad about. Sometimes the parkour is a bit sticky. That's probably the biggest one for me. That's a fine trade-off for me for how good the parkour is. If it's a little bit sticky just because they're trying to really figure out how to get you to stick to each point while also having it flow well, right? And having all of those different like options for you to go. So I think there could be like a little bit of improvement there because the stickiness can be a little bit weird at times. But other than that, I think it's great. They have puzzles on the climbing puzzles as well. So it's not like Origins and later on where you can climb pretty much anything. And I do like climbing everything, but I think having climbing puzzles is great. Kind of like a throwback to the Ezio trilogy where you had to climb specific holds in a specific way, like up towers. That's what they're doing with the rock faces so that you can't just climb everything. And I think that was a great way to do it. So you have to find where the holds are and do that. It just makes it slightly more immersive in some ways too, and just gives another added puzzle feature, which I enjoy. This is one of those games where they yell at you whenever you are trying to talk to chat. That's more of a streamer thing than anything, because most people aren't going to sit there and like, I mean, maybe if somebody's talking to them in real life and then he's like, hey, we're supposed to be doing this. So that's not my favorite way of dealing with it, but I think it's good for people who like maybe get distracted and forgot what they were doing, especially with a minimalistic HUD. So I don't have a lot of complaints there, but it was just something I noticed. Fun fact, I got the assassin outfit from Roshan at the very beginning, and I used that for Eivor pretty much my entire Valhalla playthrough because it was OP. People asked where I got it. I don't know how I stumbled on that mission because I wasn't trying to do a ton of side stuff. I was trying to race through because we finished it in like 2 weeks. Valhalla, the giant game. Yeah. So I noticed that the other leader had that outfit, so it'll be funny to see his story and why on earth she gave us his outfit. I find that intriguing. And just an interesting tidbit, the skill tree starts from the top. One of the chatters in Nebraska noticed that it started from the top instead of the bottom, which was interesting. And maybe symbolic to something. I think that's pretty much what I've got. This game is phenomenal. I'm excited. The piece that I told you about at the beginning, the two things that I wanted to tell you at the very end of the video are, one, they set expectations perfectly with the modern day. I'm personally a big modern day fan. I think that the layers and the overarching there is perfect. So I wanted a little bit more modern day, but I don't think it's a big deal that they don't have it when they set those expectations properly. I would like to see more in the future, but I think that they did a really good job with even just having the voiceover. I think they did that perfectly. And then the second thing is the, where it's going to be in the lineup for me. This might end up being my second favorite Assassin's Creed. I say second because I think a lot of people's first favorite Assassin's Creed is the one that they play first. So my favorite is probably going to remain 4. There's something about it that's like magic to me because that's the first one that I played. But this one is so phenomenally done. And I think it's going to even surpass 1 for me, which is my second one. I think it's going to surpass Odyssey. I don't think it's going to have as much replayability, but I think where it's going to have replayability is in some of the black box, in doing challenge run type situations, in really digging into some of the detail in the game, and reliving the story and trying to pick out things that you didn't see before. So I think that's where the replayability is going to be more than going through and having a million different types of side missions. But it might open up a lot more. I pretty much got through the tutorial section in my 2 to 3 hours while I was talking to chat and really going through it and analyzing it. So I think it's going to open up a bit more, and there might be a lot more replayability later in the game. Finally, if you like Assassin's Creed, check out my AC1 video. I'm going to be publishing a lot of videos on the series coming up now that I've finished it, but I do have my big AC1 video, and then I also have my predictions video if you want to see everything that I said about what could happen in the game and what is happening in the game. I love this game. I love this series. I am excited to play more of it. I'll be doing it all this weekend long with the stream when I get back from this trip, and I'm just impressed. I'm impressed. Thanks again, Ubisoft, for giving me this code. It's the first one I've ever gotten, and it's kind of I mean, it's literally a dream come true for me to even be noticed by Ubisoft, much less get to play this game early for free. Like that, I still haven't fathomed that properly. So thank you. This is the most immersive, expansive, and experimental series that I've ever seen, and it is my favorite for a reason. I'm so excited to play this game, and I will catch you. By the way, I don't think I ever introduced myself. I am MADkurious, and I will see you in the next one.